Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final low carbon energy innovation community of practice. My name is Helda, and with me today, there's my colleague Donald Whitman, and also from Pollution Probe, Richard and Ruth, and also from Quest, Andy as well. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here as we wrap up this 2-year journey together. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we live, work, and gather is the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land and since time immemorial. Across what is now known as Canada, we recognize the diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, each with unique histories, cultures, and languages. We honor their enduring connections to the land, water, and skies, and we commit to learning from their stewardship and resilience as we work toward reconciliation and respect for the Indigenous rights. A few housekeeping notes for today's is if you can, please introduce yourself in the chat and also keep yourself muted if you're not speaking. You can ask questions in the chat or raise your hand as well. And since we are living in this virtual webinar, we'd love to see your faces. So please to keep your camera on if you're comfortable. It's not mandatory, but it's always good to see faces, right? And this session, as I mentioned earlier, it will be recorded and we'll share both the recording and the meeting minutes with all of our COP members. I see, let me see just the waiting room. Okay. Okay, Eddie is here. So it's a good chance and it's a good time. So in this final session of the COP session, I also Quest and Pollution Probes wants to give a very special thank you to Eddie Oldfield with his brilliant mind and his dedication. Eddie helped shape this project, all of the work during this project as well. As you all know, Eddie is former Quest colleague, and it's so nice to see Eddie here again. And so, yeah, thank you so much, Eddie. And I guess with that, I'll go to the next one, our agenda for today. So here's our agenda for today. We'll start with a recap of the project and the journey we've shared through these COP sessions, then highlight the key findings and outputs, including our national assessment report and also the policy database. And after that, we'll look ahead at opportunities of what next, and then wrap up with our Q&A and listen from your feedback. A little bit about us. This initiative is partnership between Quest Canada and Pollution Probe. So Quest work with communities across Canada to support their pathways to net zero, while Pollution Probe has a long history advancing practical evidence-based environmental solutions. And so together, we set out this program or this project set out to better understand what enables and what holds back innovation in Canada's energy sector. And with that, I will pass it to Richard.
Great, thank you, Helda. I just want to talk about what is the LCEI initiative. So really, it was built on work we did prior, looking at innovation sandboxes and the regulatory barriers to innovation. And we all know, I think everyone around, especially on this call, would understand that for Canada to achieve its 2050 target, there needs to be technological innovation and energy innovation. It will require a complete transformation in the way energy is generated and distributed and used throughout the country, and this will require innovation. Innovation, not just in technology, but also innovation in business models, markets, policies, and regulation. Yet I think it's clear that current energy regulatory policy, business, and market frameworks are prohibitive to achieving the low carbon innovation we need by 2050. And this will also limit the economic benefits to Canadians as well. Our project looks at how we can create the regulatory, policy, and business frameworks and also create the market conditions that are needed to enable the innovation that Canada needs. And so for this, we developed a holistic systems-based understanding of what is needed and to inform lasting innovation frameworks across Canada so that we can achieve the low carbon energy innovation we will need. Next slide. So this has been a 3-year project. It has been a long one. We have been working on this for a while. And in fact, if you include the time you spent working looking at innovation sandboxes, we've been doing this for near on 6 years. We tried to do this in a very iterative format. So in 2023, we launched a national community practice meeting, and since then, we've generally been holding bi-monthly sessions. Based on the feedback we've from the community practice and our engagement with them, we also conducted jurisdictional research and a research database, which you're going to hear about more later. From that, we have held multiple rounds of engagement with every jurisdiction across Canada in order to develop our national low carbon energy innovation assessment. And of course, in just a couple months ago, back in June in Toronto, we held our National Energy Innovation Symposium here in Toronto. And I'll hand over to Helda.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so the community of practice, as Richard mentioned, the whole project started back in 2023 and it has run through to this year. The idea of this community of practice was simple but really powerful to bring together the diverse voices. So from utilities, regulators, indigenous leaders, NGOs, private sectors, to talk about what are the barriers and opportunities in low carbon innovation. So our goal was to create a space for collaboration, share learnings, and generate insights that could fit directly into our database and our assessment. So across 11 sessions, we've done just that. Over those 11 sessions, some strong themes emerged. So first, collaborations and data. So we heard about the need for stronger partnerships, better systems to share information, and regionalized approaches that
Help to search and download drivers utilities, BIOS, and user manuals for your.
Sorry about that. Yeah, again, if you're not speaking, please unmute yourself. Okay, I will continue. So the first, collaboration and data. And the second, we also heard that innovations, policies, and regulations. We had examples from Ontario's sandbox, the UK's Ofgem models, but also the big challenge of aligning regulation with the net zero. And from there, sectoral innovations, so around electrification, smart grid Atlantic, utilities testing, hydrogen and renewable gas. This show progress, but also highlights the hurdles. Another big theme around Indigenous and regional perspectives. So some of the most inspiring stories came from the Indigenous leaders and Northern communities. So around innovating in ways that are rooted in their own priorities and realities. And finally, national alignment. So the need for assessment or other scorecards from other organizations, their frameworks. It really helps to allow us, have a fair comparisons while still driving ambitions toward net zero. So taken together, these themes shape our two big outputs, the assessment and also the policy database. Alongside our COP session, and earlier Richard also mentioned that another milestone was the symposium back in June. So that event brought together an even wider group from regulated and unregulated markets to policy experts, utilities, indigenous leaders, and also innovators. So it was rich day for discussion. And to give us a proper recap, I'll pass it over to Richard.
Great, thank you, Helda. So we had, it was a great event for those of you who were able to make it. It was a lot of great conversations that were going on. What we had a number of different panels with people from across the country talking about what they have been doing and what innovation means to them and what are the barriers and what are the solutions they see. So we had both people from regulated and unregulated markets, and what we really heard there was that the players, be that in regulated or unregulated market, they are innovating. There are still questions remaining about how far and what areas they should be innovating. I think that is probably down to some policy uncertainty in some areas where they're not sure just how much they should be pushing, and that also requires some guidance as to how that should be done. That is particularly true for obviously the regulated sector. One of the issues that always comes up, of course, is who's going to pay. That is always a big issue when it comes to innovation. Who pays for this innovation? How do we ensure that the costs are allocated fairly and that the people who can benefit are the ones who will bear the cost, and to make sure the vulnerable consumers are protected. We also had the pleasure of having a commissioner from the Régie de l'Énergie who has offered insights from Quebec. I think Quebec is at the forefront of energy innovation. They are leading in many areas and are doing some really interesting work, some of which is not known all across Canada. So we heard about that. Again, we heard similar problems that they were having in Quebec, talking about how to regulate innovation, what is the relationship between the regulator, the government, the utilities, the private sector, how that all fits together, and also and as part of how all these elements fit together, how are we going to allocate costs between them as well? And next slide, I'll hand over to Helga.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard. So as Richard mentioned, we also held 3 different breakouts groups or rooms. So one breakout group focused on the policy role in enabling net zero, the big message around transition certainty. So clear stage objective timelines so industry and communities can move with confidence. We also heard about the engagement, so not just box checking, but also inclusive and accountable. People wanted to reframe goals too, so around quality of life, not just environment or economy. And finally, clear financial signals, so around taxonomies, market commitments, creative approaches like circular economy models. So the takeaway from these breakout rooms that thoughtful, values-based communications build trust and market confidence. We also have another group, or the second one, look at the enabling conditions, how regulations and markets can support innovation. So they saw pilots as learning tools, uncovering the unknowns and building models to scale. They also emphasized right touch regulation. So don't over-regulate too soon, start with long-term signals, and then adapt. The narrative and then shift from, as Richard earlier mentioned, who pays to why pay. So focus on benefits to end users. And governance has to be adaptive, learning across jurisdictions. And the message from this room is around regulation should enable innovation and evolve alongside the markets. The last breakout rooms, the third one was on inclusivity. So people said engagement often feel performative. That erodes trust. So technical language and inaccessible formats also shut people out. Solutions that appear from these discussions included subsidized pilots in underserved communities, low carbon labor programs, and also the message from this room or the breakout rooms is that innovation must be built with communities, not just for them. And so the whole or a key takeaway from this is that policy needs clarity and value-based framing. Regulation must enable and evolve with markets, and communities needs to be front and center. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Richard and Ruth for an overview of our national assessment report.
Great. Some of you who were at the symposium, you'll have heard some of this before, but we're trying to make sure everyone understands and is aware of our national assessment report. So this was, as I mentioned, this was a long-running process. There were 3 years that we took. It was very iterative. It was really informed by collaboration and consultation along the way. And a lot of that collaboration and consultation was done with the people on this call. First, what we did is we developed indicators such as policy, market conditions, and tested those with stakeholders across Canada. That was really our first round of engagements. Second, we gathered information on all indicators and then reviewed our results with stakeholders to make sure that we weren't missing anything, to make sure that we understood what the policy frameworks were in every jurisdiction across Canada. And third, we developed an assessment framework, which again, we tested in jurisdictional engagements with stakeholders, as well as at these community practice sessions in order to make sure that we had tested it enough and that there was an understanding as to how this works and whether or not it provides valuable information. In this engagement, we engaged over 200 people. I think the last time I saw the count was 212, but I guess now it is a bit higher now that we're talking to you. And again, many of you were likely participants in this session. Next slide. Before we start moving on to this, it's always important to talk about what our definitions. Maybe this is from too much time in academia, but it's always important that everybody understands what the definitions you are using. So when we refer to low carbon innovations, we're very holistic. So we're referring to policies, regulatory frameworks, and factors that enable research, development, deployment, new practices, new business models, and new products or services that reduce GHG emissions in the energy sector. So we're not just referring to technological development, we're also referring to business development, regulatory modernization, new market frameworks, new ways of delivering services. And these can be done by governments, utilities, industries, tech providers, third-party organizations, basically anyone who works in the energy sector. We're not limiting ourselves to any one player or any one participant in the energy sector. Next slide. This slide gives you an overview, a high-level overview of what the results we saw from our assessment. So when we assessed the different jurisdictions, we used four categories. So there's strong, which has the enabling conditions, and they're developed and integrated. In the moderate, we're talking about key conditions. Emerging, there's some foundational elements with good things to build on, but still at the early stage. And especially the pink color, reddish pink color, depending on what you on to do it. There really highlights the room for opportunities in these areas. And we evaluated the policies, regulation practices across every Canadian jurisdiction. Note, we are not assessing Northwest Territories and Nunavut, given that they have unique conditions and would require a different process. We do include them in our assessment report, but we do not directly assess them just because that would not be fair, and we would need to develop a new methodology in order to assess them. So this is a very high level overview as to what we've kind of found and where our results lie at this stage. And I'm going to hand over to Ruth, who will start going through the 4 policy areas that we worked on.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Ruth Kira, and I'm part of the energy team at Pollution Probe, where I focus on energy and climate mitigation research. As Richard mentioned, many different indicators influence low carbon energy innovation. We try to organize them in a way that makes sense. To do this, we conducted a lit review looking at sources such as Efficiency Canada's CORCA, the Canadian Climate Institute, Clean Energy Canada, EIA, OECD, and so on. We also spoke with the jurisdiction themselves several times, as Richard and Hilda were mentioning. We spoke with some of you. This process helped us shape the assessment into 4 main policy areas that influence and support low carbon energy innovation. Before talking about this specific policy area, in general, each policy area contains topics, metrics, and submetrics that help assess the topics and eventually the overall policy area. Each submetrics is designed to be simple, measurable, and as comparable as possible using a binary yes-no approach. For example, on this slide, you can see whether the province has a net zero electricity plan, yes or no, and if it's aligned with national goals, yes or no. The first policy area, enabling net zero energy policy, includes macro climate change policy. The idea is that strong climate leadership encourages innovators to pursue net zero targets. When there is a clear path, it's easier for innovation to follow it. As you can see here, this policy area has 3 topics: climate leadership. This focuses on climate action and GHG targets. Sector climate leadership. This focuses on sector mitigation policy and whether they are coordinated. That means it also looks at the presence of holistic plan across this sector. Sometimes province might have separate electricity and transportation plans, but they do not talk to each other. It also considers whether utilities understand their role in decarbonization without a clear policy or regulation defining what decarbonizing the energy system means. Utilities may follow what they believe is helpful or economically beneficial rather than following net zero targets or a combination of both. The third, industrial carbon pricing. This look at whether revenues from industrial carbon pricing are allocated towards GHG reduction in ways that align with the climate mitigation plan. We collected the data and verified it with the jurisdiction. As we said, this ongoing engagement helped us refine the assessment. To summarize this, there are three policy areas: climate leadership, sector climate leadership, and carbon pricing. Next slide, please. What have we seen? This summary reflects key findings for policy area 1. We encourage you to read the report for full details. What you can see here is a high-level overview only for all the sub-metrics under this policy area. How to read this table? The color represents the factors and policy. In general, strong green indicates more factors and policy, and red means fewer or none. Let's take BC as an example. BC shows strong overall and sectoral climate leadership, strong green. Our key findings to enable greater innovation: most jurisdictions, as you know, have set a 2030 GHG target, put climate mitigation plans in place, and establish accountability mechanism. Many are also signaling net zero targets for 2050. Yet detailed 2050 plans are often missing. We need a clear long-term plan to direct innovation, to direct innovators to pursue low-carbon innovation. What gaps have we identified? Many provinces have sector energy plans, but do not have integrated approach across electricity, thermal, transportation, and industry. We heard this from many jurisdictions. We are starting to see progress. Ontario's proposed an integrate energy resource plan. Quebec Bill 69 proposed a legal framework for energy transition. British Columbia has identified the need for holistic energy planning. Manitoba has integrated planning, but only for gas and electricity sector. About pricing revenue, all jurisdictions have industrial carbon pricing system, provincial or federal. Some direct revenue towards GHG reduction, some not. This policy area includes macro climate policy. As I said before, and I will say it again, a clear direction helps innovators pursue climate-related innovations. Next slide, please. Okay, the second policy area, enabling condition for low carbon energy innovation, it focuses on two parts: the energy structure, covering suppliers, retails, and regulatory aspect. It looks at whether the structure is competitive and whether a bilateral option are available. The second, policy and programs that support the low carbon energy transition, such as net metering and low carbon heating policy. This topic also includes the scoring from Energy Efficiency Canada scorecard that Helda was mentioning before, which represent the energy efficiency program and policy in each jurisdiction. The idea is the same, is that strong, clear policy and programs help innovators develop new solutions in the energy sectors. If a province has smart meters, it's easier to innovate there, for example. The second, a competitive market can enable greater innovation. However, the province can still innovate without it, as we heard from many provinces and territories regarding that. Okay. So this table represents all the sub-metric under this policy, the second policy area. The colors are used as before. Strong green indicates more factors and policies. We can see that for the first topic, the energy structure, Alberta and Ontario support innovation through competitive market and advanced regulatory system. Rate structures in this system can link utility revenues to performance and innovation, not just cost recovery. In contrast, provinces like BC and Quebec rely more on policy-driven monopoly system to promote innovation. For the second topic, energy transition policy and measure can support innovation in that field. For example, a province has net metering, smart metering, it's easier to innovate there. What we have seen, all provinces and territories have net metering, some have smart meters, either fully installed or in pilot phases. Very few have policies specifically focused on low carbon thermal energy. So this policy area examines the condition for energy innovation, the structure of energy market, and the existing measure and policy in that sector. Okay, next slide. This is the third policy area. Enabling energy innovation, R&D, deployment, and implementation is the core of our work, the main policy area. It focuses on policy and strategies that directly support low carbon innovation. The first topic, policy and funding for innovation. This includes support for research, deployment, development, and funding programs to promote innovation. For example, does the province have policies that actively promote low carbon innovation? Yes or no? A regulatory environment, we look for mandates for innovation, energy efficiency, DSM, or environmental goals, and if tools like sandbox, regulatory trials, or inquiry services exist to help innovators navigate regulation. For example, does the province have a legally binding mandate for innovation? Yes or no? And the third is the ecosystem. It includes border networks such as innovation hubs, third-party actors, and others. Okay, so the table here represents all the sub-metric under this policy area. The color are used as before. Strong green indicates more factor and policy. We can see that for the first topic, enabling innovation policy, low carbon innovation policy are still incomplete. Several jurisdictions have policies that support early stage R&D and deployment, but most still require clear plans. So we need more of these plans. Only a few, like Northwest Territories and Nunavut, have policies to assess which technologies are the best for a net zero future. The second, enabling innovation regulatory, we can see that regulatory support is limited in most provinces. Ontario stands out with a more advanced regulatory framework, as most of you know, including the sandbox tools and a clear mandate for innovation. Other jurisdictions are moving to this direction, but still need to modernize their regulatory system. For example, Manitoba Electricity Act promotes innovation in demand-side management, energy saving, and GHG reduction. Nova Scotia has its justification criteria, and we have more examples. The third topic, innovation ecosystem, we can see that innovation ecosystem and involvement from third-party organizations are active in most jurisdictions. There are some like more or less, but there are a lot of organizations. So to summarize here, this is the main policy area as it includes innovation policy and regulatory environment that enables innovation and the supporting ecosystem. So next slide, please. This is the last policy area. It's building comprehensive needs of innovation, workforce collaboration, reconciliation, and equity for energy transition. This policy area includes the soft conditions and policy that enable the energy transition. We heard during our engagement that communities and the public need to be part of the energy transition, understand the energy transition goals, and be involved in a real consultation process. Some community, for example, feel that when discussion happen, a decision have already been made, and consultation is just like a check the box process. We also heard that for smooth energy transition, we need to support the current workforce and prepare for the future needs of the workers in a clean sector. Okay, so next slide, please. Yeah. So this table, as before, represents all the sub-metrics under this policy area, the colors as used as before. And here we only collected the data. And we did not give a score, we just collected all the data. What we have seen, workforce policy for future needs remain limited. Some jurisdictions support the current energy workforce and training programs, but yet few have long-term strategy to prepare workers for a net zero future. So we need more from that. About community engagement and reconciliation, approaches vary across jurisdiction. We can see a lot of progress in that aspect, but still need more work in that. Some engage with the communities and indigenous groups, while others have a fewer initiatives. For example, Yukon has an IPP policy require at least 50% of projects to have Yukon First Nation ownership. Okay, from all of this process, we not only learn about all the policy and factors you can read in our full report that promote low carbon innovation, but also identify best practices in each province and territory and could apply it elsewhere. For example, Ontario's sandbox approach or the ambition climate policies or from other jurisdictions. And I will now hand it over to Richard to summarize the key finding. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So what does this all mean? As you can see, we have managed to gather together quite a lot of information, a lot of very discrete and very granular information. Really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what does it all mean? Well, we have 6 overall findings that I think jump out at us from our work here. One is the need to align climate policy and market signals, the need to balance out policy certainty and competitive action. We need policy certainty. We also need the market, but how do we balance these out? And that's going to vary upon each jurisdiction. Some of that will depend on the particulars of the way the energy sector in that jurisdiction, but all jurisdictions will have to find some way of balancing out the policy and the market. There is still the need to modernize energy regulations, and we're starting to see some movement, although I think most regulators across Canada have not moved on modern regulatory approaches such as performance-based regulation, never mind sandboxes, although we are starting to see a number of jurisdictions starting to look into more performance-based regulation, which is great, but we need to make sure that is spread across the country a bit more widely. There's also the need to plan energy systems holistically. This is something that people have been talking about for years, but as the energy system changes, silo planning will not work. As heating starts including both gaseous fuels and electricity, how are we going to plan this together? And we need to make sure that we bring all this together. We also, going back on that, we also need to prioritize thermal energy innovation. Planning focuses on networks, primarily electric and gas, but we also need to focus on the outcomes. What the thermal energy we have, and we need to look at what is the best way of getting that thermal energy and what are the trade-offs we're willing to accept, and what are the potential of the different solutions and the role of electrification, gaseous fuels, and all that, and how are these all going to fit together in order to make sure we can have cleaner and economic thermal energy systems. Indigenous inclusion needs to be at the center of everything we do. Without this, it will not be possible to achieve the energy transition we are hoping for. And again, without the skilled workforce, we're also not going to achieve the energy transition we hope for. Every company we talked to in Canada talked about skilled labor shortages. And as we start needing to build out more and more of these new networks and new ways of doing things, that's going to become even more and more difficult. And so we really need to think about how do we make sure we have the workforce we need today and in the future, and how do we make sure we have those people? Next slide. One of the great things of working on low carbon energy innovation is it also allows for us to kind of branch out and build on this in certain discrete area. One area that we are working on that is where the LCEI is a foundational project, but we're building on that foundation to look into certain particular issues that we've identified. One area we found is particularly that low carbon energy innovation tends to be focused on urban areas and has left rural, remote, and Indigenous communities in many cases out of the equation. This is not always the case, but it has been widely the case. So we are also doing a project which has been funded by the OEB Innovation Sandbox Challenge, where we are looking at creating frameworks specifically for the use of rural, remote, Indigenous communities. In this case, we are focused on Ontario. While there will be similarities, and some of the frameworks we're developing can probably be used across Canada, the different ways of government and the different systems will, of course, make them more useful in Ontario. And really, what we want to look at is how can we promote energy innovation, Indigenous, rural, and remote communities, so we can benefit these communities. So it's hard sometimes to work out what are the different ways companies need to work in these, and innovators need to work in these communities. We're hoping to kind of help them out so that we can make sure this energy innovation benefits everyone across Canada. Next slide. So the framework we're developing looking for rural, remote, Indigenous communities is really looking at 3 stages where we look on with the early stage, how do we gather community information? What is the facilitator, the energy champion that will help bridge communication between the community and the proponent. In many cases, communities may not trust the proponents. How do we build up that trust? The second would be the co-creation of the innovation project, and how do we engage and again continue to build trust and collaboratively develop projects that will benefit both the proponent and the community. And then of course the important implementation is always important. We have to get this stuff done. So how do we make sure that when the project is implemented, that the community continues to benefit and that the implementation is successful and that there's effective ongoing relationships and ongoing operations. So these frameworks should be released later on this year, and we'll let you guys know when it comes out as well. I think it'd be really interesting to think, well, how are we supposed to be working with these rural, remote, and Indigenous communities? I'm now going to pass over to Helda to talk about the database we developed.
Awesome. Thanks, Richard and Ruth. So yeah, one of the most significant outputs in our project or our initiative is the Canada's first low carbon energy innovation policy database. So I'll just show you here. This is basically the screenshot, but my colleague Donald will be able to share the link to our database. So it really brings together assessment of policies, enabling conditions across provinces and territories. Is structured into 4 areas, the ones that Ruth earlier already explained. It is searchable by province, by policy area or topic. And so really and truly, let me just see, the design of the database really to make it as a practical tool. So it's give a national snapshot of where policy stands across provinces and territories using simple yes, no, or partly system that make it easy to see, the gaps and opportunities. In using these tools, the 4 areas cover the climate targets and accountability, regulatory structures, R&D deployment and implementation, and also workforce and equity policies. So the purpose is really build a clearer picture of Canada's policy landscape and also guide investment, innovation, and also equitable pathway to net zero. I believe my colleague shared the links to the database. I can show you a little bit of how to use it. Just give me a second. So if you click on the link, my favorite one is always, so this is the database looks like. As I mentioned, you can search by province, policies areas that you would like. We have on the bottom the legend of what are the difference of the policies areas. My favorite things from this one is that you can search it by any tag. So any keywords that you feel you want to search, just type it, and then province you use by province that you would like, and then all of the results will be there. And the reference here on the right hand on the screen here, you can click on each of these links and it will brings you to the resources. And I will give you some time today as well to explore the database. Let us know how do you find it, if it's helpful. Let us know if you have any suggestions or comments around this. We're happy to hear about it. And so on the next ones, as we look beyond LCEI, a few opportunities stands out. So continuing to update the assessment and database, deeper policy research, exploring regulatory barriers and enablers. So Andy, my colleague from class, will speak more on that shortly. Knowledge mobilization, so turning insight into brief, workshops and tools. We can also hosting lighter topic-based COP sessions in the future. And of course, collaboration. So this project has been stronger because of your engagement and perspective. So this is a soft invitation if you see opportunities where our work intersects, or if you think your organization could benefit from partnering with us in the next phase, please let us know. We'd love to explore, together what collaboration could look like, whether that's co-developing case studies, piloting new approaches, or shaping research priorities. And so now I would like to share it or pass it to my colleague Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Helda. Andy Nikiforuk, Senior Lead Policy with Quest Canada. I've been leading up the Energy Transition Policy Program for about the last year and a half. Some of you have participated in that program. Just a quick overview. The goal of the program is to identify barriers and issues to better align local and provincial government policy in and enabling the energy transition to net zero by 2050. We've conducted it's a collaborative, consultative kind of process where we work together, identify ideas, and then figure out how to address those ideas and challenges. We had hosted four virtual workshops in total, two in Alberta in May and June of 24, two in Ontario in January and May of 25, plus two in-person roundtables in Alberta with government participation in the roundtable in November of 24 and again in June of 25. What are we going to do with the LCEI findings? There's a lot of great information in there. Key findings of strengths and gaps can inform and provide focus for the role of communities going forward. I'm starting to read from the slide rather than speaking to you, so I'm going to change that. A key focus of the policy program is community participation and holistic integrated energy planning, or what some people are calling integrated energy systems planning. What I feel we need to do is explore exactly how does that work? Exactly how do communities participate in such a process? What's the benefit to the energy system as a whole from doing that? And how does it happen? I'm looking back at a couple of the key takeaways, or the key takeaway from the symposium, and one of the bullets from the what we heard slide that were presented earlier, and the key findings as well. So the key takeaway is that innovation must be policy aligned, market enabled, and community driven to build trust and unlock longer term value. And what we heard bullet point is we need stronger partnerships, better data systems, regionalized solutions, and regulatory modernization. That's really what we're hearing in the processes, the workshops, and the roundtables of the ETPP process as well. And it aligns very closely with the key finding slide that Richard presented. Well, going forward, I think the thing for the policy development role to do of Quest and partners and members, as the case may be, is to look at the best practices and the gaps and identify some policy recommendations to address the gaps and learn from the best practices. And a question for me, at least, is how can communities drive innovation and what policies are required to stimulate that community action and those community actions? So I'm still very much like a 2-year-old, but rather than saying why all the time, really what I'm saying is what, why, benefit, and how can we drive innovation through community involvement and integrated energy system planning. I have a feeling I'm getting pretty close to my 5 minutes because my nature is to speak until somebody reins me in. So I'm going to rein myself in right now. If there are questions, I can handle them now or later in the Q&A session. If you'd like any info from the ETPP process in Alberta and or Ontario, it's a transparent process. I'm happy to share the themes and the summary notes from any of those. Helda, I'm going to turn it back to you now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. So yeah, Donald just shared the links to the ETPP program or the website to our program. So please do check that website. And it comes to the discussion and Q&A, so right on time. I would like now to open the floor for discussion and Q&A. This is really, your chance to all of us to reflect, ask questions, or share your perspective, or if you have any opinions, suggestions, or disagreement, maybe from our findings, whether on the report or the online database that we just showed you, or whatever it is that you want to ask us, please raise your hand or use the chat. if you're still thinking as well, feel free to use the chat, or you can also send us later after the session through our email, or send us email. That will be fine as well. And I guess while we're waiting for if there's any questions for us, I would like to give us to the evaluation questions that we've prepared. So this is really a chance for us to welcome your feedback. If you can take approximately 3 minutes to fill out the evaluation poll, your input is very important, and it will help shape our future research and collaboration as well. So with that, I will launch the poll. Okay. Yeah, if you can please fill out the evaluation poll. It will take very quick, between 2 to 3 minutes. Basically, the overall value of the whole community of practice series, how it helps you or your work. Let me know if you see the polls on your screen. If you're not, I will share it again.
If you have any questions later on, please do email us. We're always happy to talk about these things.
Yep.
Some people I know don't like talking. Thank you, David. It's been great having you along this journey, and we hope the journey continues. I think there's a lot we can build off it and update as we go along to make sure we can capture the benefits of a low carbon energy innovation and how we can make it better in Canada. Feel free to contact us at any time. You have our details.
Yeah, this one, our details, but while we are also, if you can fill out the evaluation poll, that will be greatly appreciated. Okay, I see some answers coming in.
It does actually provide us a lot of very important information.
For sure. I guess while we're waiting on the poll as well, on behalf of Quest and the Pollution Probe team, we really thank you for being part of this community of practice. Over 2 years and 11 sessions, you've really helped us build something meaningful. The report, the online database, it's all from your inputs and suggestions, all of the sessions that we held. So while this marks close of the LCEI COP session, we really do hope to stay connected and continue collaborating towards Canada Net Zero future. And just a reminder as well, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the recording and the meeting notes from this session will be shared with all of the COP members after this session. And so with that, I'll thank you again. If there is no other questions or suggestions or anything, I will end the recording for today.